Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to Snuff by Terry Pratchett. Part 13. It was nice to have a walk with young Sam again. Dad self-consciously out for a walk with his lad, yes? That was the picture. Regrettably, this picture included a distant prospect of Sergeant Detritus, who was merging with the landscape, a feat that a troll officer can achieve by simply removing his armor and sticking a geranium behind his ear, whereupon he becomes, being of a rocky and stony persuasion, pretty much part of the landscape without even trying. Usually, the troll officers wore supersized versions of the standard issue armor, because a lot of the power of a copper consists in looking like a copper. Footnote. That is to say, something bigger than he in fact is, which will turn very nasty if you think you can give this copper in front of you now a scene to, because you are afloat to the tonsils on beer. End footnote. Safety considerations didn't matter. There were plenty of weapons which, if handled with skill, could go through steel armor, but all they would do to a naked troll was make him angry. Right now, Detritus was failing to maintain a low profile. He was a bodyguard. That was the truth of it. And he was also carrying his peacemaker, which could, as it were, do what it said on the box. Some weapons are called a Saturday night special. Detritus's multi-arrow crossbow would last you all week, and somewhere where Vimes couldn't see him, which meant that nobody else could either, there was Willikins. There was your picture. Dad taking his lad for a walk, in the presence of enough firepower to kill a platoon. Sybil had insisted, and that was that. Vimes himself, being in danger, was one thing, and Sybil had accepted that right from the start. But young Sam? Never! As they strolled up Hangman's Hill to see the new Clacks Tower, Vimes told himself that Stratford would not use a bow. A bow was for expediency. But a killer? Now, a killer would want to be up close, where he could see. Stratford had killed the goblin girl, and had gone on killing her long after she was dead. He was a boy who liked his fun. He would want Vimes to know who was killing him. Vimes realized, knew killers too well for his own peace of mind. As they arrived on the hill, they were met by a grinning nobby, who saluted with a variation on the theme of smartness, but with some embarrassment, because he was not alone. A young goblin woman was sitting next to him. Nobby hastily tried to shoo her away, and she, apparently with reluctance, retired to a minimum safe distance, still looking adoringly at the corporal. Despite everything, Vimes tried to suppress the urge to smile, and managed to turn it into a stiff look. Fraternizing with the natives, are you, Nobby? Young Sam wandered over to the goblin girl and took hold of her hand, which was something he tended to do to any female that he met for the first time, a habit which his father considered would quite possibly open doors for him in later life. The girl tried gently to pull her hand away, but young Sam was a ferocious holder. Nobby looked embarrassed. I ain't fraternising with her, Mr. Vimes. She wants to fraternise with me. She come out with the straw basket of little mushrooms and gives them to me. Honestly. Are you sure they aren't poisonous? Nobby looked blank. Don't know, Mr. Vimes. I ate them anyway. Very nice, very crunchy. Slightly nutty, you might say. And Fred's here now, sir. This young lady, and to Vimes's surprise and approval, Nobby did not put inverted commas around the word lady, walked right up to him, took this weird shiny pot thing out of his hand, which was amazing because no one else could get it off him. And there he was, just like normal, although I think we're going to have to remind him about washing and crapping only in the privy and so on. Vimes gave up. It was true that every organisation had to have its backbone, and therefore it stood to reason that there also would have to be some person who equated to the bits usually destined for dog food. But Nobby was loyal and lucky, and if there is anything that a policeman really needs, it's luck. Maybe Nobby had got lucky. What are you doing up here, Nobby? He said. Nobby looked at Vimes as if he were mad and pointed to the wobbling temporary clacks tower. Have to check the clacks messages, Mr. Vimes. Actually, young Tony, who is the only one manning it, he sort of types them and wraps them around a stone and they drops down, which is... There was a rattle on Nobby's helmet, and he deftly caught a stone wrapped in a strip of paper before it hit the ground. Which is why I just stand here, Mr. Vimes. Nobby unrolled the paper and announced. One double stateroom and one single on the Roberta E. Biscuit, departing at 9 p.m. tomorrow. Lucky you, Mr. Vimes. Clacks! What would we do without it, eh? There was a shout from above. Stand back! Man coming down! And Vimes saw the whole structure of the clacks tower tremble as the young man carefully lowered himself from one spar to another, testing everyone before putting his weight on it. Testing everyone before putting his weight on it. He dropped the last few feet and held out his hand to Vimes. Pleased to meet you, Sir Samuel. Sorry it's shaky, but we were still working on it last night. A real rush job. Needs must when Lord Veterinary drives, you might say. We'll do it properly later, if that's okay by you. I've got it lined up on a Grand Trunk Tower, and they'll bounce it to anywhere you want, plus a feed down to a clacks on your house too. Of course, you'll have to have somebody manning this one to maintain the link, but from what I see, that won't be a problem. The young man saluted Vimes and added, Best of luck to you, sir, and now I'm off to have my meal and a wash. There was another clang on the helmet of Nobby Nobbs, and a wad of paper wrapped around a pebble fell at his feet. The young clacksman picked it up proprietorially and read the message. Oh, it's just an acknowledgement of service closure, confirming that I am standing down for a break. My assistant typed it. He didn't really need to pass it on, but he is a conscientious little bugger, and I have never seen such a quick study. Show him how to do something once and that's enough. Reliable little devil as well, and with those big hands he has no problem with the keyboard. As the man strode off, whistling down the hill, Vimes jumped to a conclusion like a grasshopper. Stinky! Just you come down here, you little perisher! He yelled. Right here, Commander! The little goblin was already standing almost between Vimes's boot. You operate in the clacks. Can you read? Stinky held out both large hands. No, but can look, but can remember. Green man say, Stinky, this pointy thing is called A. And Stinky don't need telling twice. And he say, this one look like bum. He called B. Good fun. The cracked voice wheedled, but in a way that seemed to Vimes to be full of cynical knowingness. The goblin is useful. Goblin is trustworthy. Goblin is helpful. Goblin isn't dead. And it seemed to Vimes that he was the only one hearing these words. Young Sam had shuffled up to hold Stinky's hand, but had thought better of it. Under his breath, Sam Vimes said, What are you, Stinky? What are you, Sam Vimes? Stinky grinned. Hang, Sam Vimes. Hang together or hang separately. Above all, hang on. Hang, Mr. Vimes. Vimes sighed. I think it's quite likely that I might, he said gloomily. He looked around to find himself pinned in the gazes of young Sam, Nobby Nobbs, and the goblin girl who had been looking at Nobby as if the little corporal was an Adonis. Embarrassed, he shrugged and said, Just a passing thought. However you put it, Fred Cullen was one of Vimes's old friends. And it was sobering to think that so was Nobby Nobbs. Vimes found the sergeant halfway down the goblin cave, looking strangely pink, bemused, but nevertheless quite cheerful, possibly because he was eating a roasted rabbit like there was no tomorrow, which clearly had been the case for the rabbit. Shiri was watching him with some care from a distance, and when she saw Vimes, gave him a smile and a thumbs-up sign, which was reassuring. Fred Cullen tried to salute, but had to think about it for a moment. Sorry about this, Mr. Vimes. Had some kind of nasty turn. All a bit vague, really, and suddenly, here I am among these people. Vimes held his breath, and Cullen continued. Very nice, very helpful, very generous too. They've been giving me all kinds of mushrooms, extremely tasty. Not very well versed in the trouser department, but I speak as I find. Makes a man think. I ain't sure what, but it does. He looked around with a strange fluorescence in his eyes. Nice in here, isn't it? Nice and calm, away from the maddening crowd. Wouldn't mind staying here for a bit. Nice. Sergeant Cullen stopped, flung the rabbit bones over his shoulder, and reached down quickly into the mess of stones behind him. He picked one up. Was it Vimes's imagination, or did it twinkle for a moment as it once again turned into just a stone? Stay as long as you like, Fred, said Vimes. I've got to go, but Nobby'll be around, and just about everybody else from the watch, or so it seems. Stay as long as you like. He glanced at Sherry Littlebottom, but perhaps not too long. More thoughts passed as young Sam's daily stroll progressed back down the hill and through the village. And when Jiminy appeared at the doorway of the pub and gave Vimes a little nod that spoke volumes, Vimes's passing thought was that an astute publican knows which way the wind is blowing and adjusts his sails accordingly. No one knew better than he that no one knows where rumours come from and how they are spread, but the little convoy, even though it included Nobby Nobbs and the goblin girl, got smiles and nods where a week ago there would have been blank stares. Because the dreadful truth is that nobody wants to support the losing side. When they reached Ramkin Hall again, Vimes found Sybil in the rose garden, apparently deadheading something that had to be done because it was on the list of things you had to do in the country, whether you liked to do it or not. She glanced up at her husband and then got on with what she was doing and said quietly, "You've been worrying people, haven't you, Sam? Lady Rust popped in unexpectedly for a social visit right after you left." Snip, snip, went the pruning shears ferociously. "Did you let her in?" Snip, snip. Of course. There was another snip, snip. "And I gave her tea and chocolate macaroons too. She may be an ignorant, way-faced bitch who gives herself a title that is not rightfully hers, but there is such a thing as manners when all is said and done. Snip, snip, snap. I only did that because that one rather spoils the symmetry, honestly. Anyway, I had a lecture about maintaining standards and banding together in defense of our culture. You know the sort of thing, it's always just a code." Lady Sybil leaned back with her shears poised and regarded the rose bushes like a bloody-handed revolutionary looking for his next aristocrat. "Do you know what the bitch said? She said, 'My dear, who cares what happens to a few trolls? Let them take drugs if they need to. That's what I say.'" Eyes ablazed, Sybil continued. "And so I thought about Sergeant Detritus and how often he saved your life. And then there was young Brick, that troll lad he adopted. And it made me so angry that I nearly said something unrepeatable. They think that I'm like them. I hate that. They just don't get it. They've got on well for years without ever having to think differently, and now they don't know how. Snip, snip, crack." "You've just killed a rose bush, dear," said Vimes, impressed. It took a pretty good grip to push those blades through an inch of what looked like a small tree. "It was a briar, Sam. Wouldn't ever do any good. You could give it a chance, perhaps." "Sam Vimes, you treasure your ignorance of gardening, so don't start weaving a social hypothesis in front of an angry woman holding a blade. There is a difference between plants and people." "Do you think her husband sent her?" Vimes said, standing back a little. "He is in the frame, you know, and I expect by the end of the day to be able to link him to smuggling, trafficking in goblins, and certainly in attempting to send Jethro Jefferson abroad to get him out of the way. I know what happens to the goblins taken to Hawonderland, and it's not good for their health. Jefferson told me that Rust was behind the eviction of the local goblins 3 years ago, and I'm hoping to get confirmation of this very shortly. All in all, it'll wipe the smile off his aristocratic face, at least." The birds were singing, and roses were pumping perfume into the air, and Lady Sybil dropped the shears into her apron pocket. "It will shame old Lord Rust, you know." "Don't think I don't know that," said Vimes. "The old boy tried to warn me off when we first got here, which just about shows his talent as a tactician. But I'll say this for the old bastard. He is honourable, honest and straightforward. It's a shame that he is also pig-headed, stupid and incompetent. But you're right, it'll hurt him, although he must have killed so many soldiers by his own incompetence that shame should by now be second nature to him. An old friend, as it were." He sighed. "Sybil, every time I have to arrest some twit who thought he could get away with swindling or extortion or blackmail? Well, I know that there is probably going to be a family in difficulties. You understand? I think about it. It preys on my mind. The trouble is, the idiots commit the crimes. As it is, I'm trying to spare some of the hangers-on in this case, provided their gratitude results in testimony. I can stretch the law for the greater good, but that's the end of it. Sybil nodded sadly, and then sniffed and said, "Can you smell smoke?" Willikins, who had been standing patiently, said, "Corporal Nobbs and his young lady wandered off into the shrubbery with young Sam, your ladyship. Sergeant Detritus accompanied them with what I now believe to be called," Willikins savoured the word like a toffee, "surreptition." This last fact was testified to by the shrubbery itself, because no shrubbery, however large, could hide the fact that a troll had just walked through it. Surreptition, surreptitious. Done, made, or acquired by stealth, clandestine. Acting or doing something clandestinely, stealthily, surreptitious. There was a small, neat fire burning in the shrubbery, watched passively by Detritus and young Sam, and nervously by Corporal Nobbs, who was watching his new young lady cooking something on a spit. "Oh, she's cooking snails," said Sybil with every sign of approval. "What a provident young lady!" "Snails," said Vimes, shocked. "Quite traditional in these parts, as a matter of fact," said Sybil. "My father and his chums used to cook them up sometimes after a drinking session. Very wholesome and full of vitamins and minerals, or so I understand. Apparently, if you feed them on garlic, they taste of garlic." Vimes shrugged. "I suppose that has to be better than them tasting of snails." Sybil pulled Sam off to one side and said quietly, "I think the goblin girl is the one that they call Shine of the Rainbow. Felicity says she's very smart." "Well, I don't think she'll get anywhere with Nobby," said Vimes. "He's carrying a torch for Verity Pushpram. You know, the fishmonger?" Sybil whispered. "She got engaged last month, Sam, to a lad who's building up his own fish fleet." They stared through the leaves and tiptoed away. "But she's a goblin," said Vimes, out of his depth. "And he is Nobby Nobbs, Sam, and she is quite attractive in a goblin sort of way, don't you think? And to be honest, I'm not sure that even Nobby's old mother knows what species her son is. Frankly, Sam, it's not our business." "But what if young Sam ate snails?" "Sam, given what he's already eaten in his short life, I wouldn't worry if I was you. I expect the girl knows what she's doing. They generally do, Sam. Believe me. Besides, this is limestone country, and there's nothing poisonous for the snails to eat. Don't worry, Sam." "Yes, but how will—" "Don't worry, Sam." "Yes, but I mean, don't worry, Sam. There's a troll and a dwarf in Lobbin Clout that have set up home together, so I've heard. Good for them, I say. It's their business, and definitely not ours." "Yes, but Sam!" During the afternoon, Sam Vimes worried. He wrote dispatches and walked up to the new tower to send them. Goblins were sitting around the tower now, staring at it. He tapped one of them on the shoulder, handed it the messages, and watched it climb the tower as if it were horizontal. A couple of minutes later, it came down with a smudged confirmation of sending slip, which it handed to him along with several other messages before sitting down to stare at the tower again. He thought, "You have lived your life in and around a cave in a hill, and now here is this magical thing that sends words right on your doorstep. That's got to command respect." Then he opened the 2 messages that had arrived for him, carefully folded up the paper, and walked back down the hill, breathing carefully and taking care not to punch the air and whoop. When Vimes reached the cottage of the woman who, to young Sam, would forever be the Pooh Lady, he stopped to hear the music. It came and went. There were false starts, and then the world revolved as liquid sound called out of the window. Only then did he dare to knock at the door. Half an hour later, walking with the measured gait of the career copper, he proceeded to the lockup. Jethro Jefferson was sitting on a stool outside. He was wearing a badge. Feeney was learning fast. The constabulary of the waterside owned precisely one badge, made of pot metal, and so, pinned to the shirt of the blacksmith, was a carefully cut-out cardboard circle with, inscribed in painstaking handwriting, the words, "Constable Jefferson works for me, be told, signed Chief Constable Upshot." There was a second, empty stool by the blacksmith, reflecting the doubling of the staff. Vimes sat down with a grunt. "How do you like being a copper, Mr. Jefferson?" "If you're looking for Feeney, Commander, he's on his lunch break. And since you ask, I can't say coppering sits very well with me, but maybe it's the kind of thing that grows on you. Besides, this smithy's a bit quiet right now, and so's the crime." The blacksmith grinned. "No one wants me chasing them. I hear things are happening, right?" Vimes nodded. "When you see Feeney, tell him that the Quirm Constabulary has picked up 2 men who apparently volunteered the information that they had shanghaied you, amongst other misdemeanors, and it seems they have a whole lot of other information that they are desperate to tell us in exchange for a certain amount of clemency." Jefferson growled. "Give me 5 minutes with them, and I'll show them what clemency is." "You're a copper now, Jethro, so you don't have to think like that," said Vimes cheerfully. "Besides, the balls are all lining up." Jefferson gave a hollow laugh, laden with malice. "I'd line their balls up for them, and just you see how far apart. I was a kid when the first lot were taken, and that bloody Rust kid was there all right. Yes, indeed, urging everybody on and laughing at them poor goblins. And when I ran out into the road to try and stop it, some of his chums gave me a right seeing to. That was just after my dad died. I was a bit innocent in those days, thought that some people were better than me, tipped me hat to gentry and so on, and then I took over the forge, and if that don't kill you, it makes you stronger." And he winked, and Vimes thought, "You'll do, you'll probably do. You've got the fire." Vimes patted his shirt pocket and heard the reassuring rustle of paper. He was rather proud of the note at the end of the clerk's message, which was a personal one from the Commandant in Quirm. It read, "When they heard that you were on the case, Sam, they were so chatty that we used up 2 2 pencils! And then Sam Vimes went to the pub just as the men were coming in and sat in the corner nursing a pint of the beetroot juice with a touch of chili to help down a snack consisting of 1 pickled egg and 1 pickled onion nestling in a packet of crisps. Vimes did not know very much about gastronomy, but he knew what he liked. And as he sat there, he saw people talking to one another and looking at him, and then one of them walked slowly over, holding his hat in front of him in both hands as if in penitence. "Name of Hasty, sir. William Hasty. Thatcher by trade, sir." Vimes moved his legs to make room and said, "Pleased to make your acquaintance, Mr. Hasty. What can I do for you?" Mr. Hasty looked around at his fellows and got that mixed assortment of waves and hoarse whispers that adds up to, "Get on with it!" Reluctantly, he turned back to Vimes, cleared his throat and said, "Well, sir, yes, of course we know about the goblins, and no one liked it much. I mean, they're a bloody nuisance if you forget to lock your chicken coop and such like, but we didn't like what was done, because it wasn't right. Not done like that. Some of us said we would suffer for it. Come the finish, because if they could do that to goblins, then what might they think they could do to real people? And some said, real or not, it wasn't right. We're just ordinary people, sir. Tenants and similar. Not big, not strong, not important. So who would listen to the likes of us? I mean, what could we have done?" Heads leaned a little forward. Breaths were held, and Vimes chewed the very last vinegary piece of crisp. Then he said, directing his gaze to the ceiling, "You've all got weapons, every man jack of you. Huge, dangerous, deadly weapons. You could have done something. You could have done anything. You could have done everything. But you didn't. And I'm not sure, but that in your shoes, I might not have done anything either. Yes?" Hasty had held up a hand. "I'm sure we're sorry, sir, but we don't have weapons." "Oh, dear me. Look around. One of the things that you could have done was think. It's been a long day, gentlemen. It's been a long week. Just remember. That's all. Remember for next time." In silence, Vimes walked across to Jiminy at the bar, noticing above the man a patch on the wall showing a gleaming paint on the plaster. For a moment, Vimes' memory filled that space with a goblin's head. Another little triumph. "Jiminy, these gentlemen are drinking at my expense for the rest of the evening. See they get home okay, even if wheelbarrows have to be deployed. I'll send Willikins down to settle with you in the morning." Only the sound of his boots broke the silence as he walked to the pub door and closed it gently behind him. 50 yards up the road, he smiled when he heard the cheering start. The Roberta E. Biscuit was, unlike the wonderful Fanny, a boat that strutted its stuff. It looked like a hogswatch decoration, and on one deck a small band was trying to play as hard as a large band. Waiting on the quayside, though, was a man wearing a hat that the captain of any fleet would desire. "Welcome aboard, your grace. And of course, your ladyship, I'm Captain O'Farrell, master of the Roberta." Then he looked down at young Sam and said, "Want to take a turn at the wheel, young shaver? That shall be arranged, and I bet your daddy would like a turn too. The captain shook Vimes's hand industriously, saying, "Captain Sillytoe had nothing but good things to say about you, sir. Nothing but good things indeed. And he hopes to see you again some day. But in the meantime, it's my duty, sir, to make you king." The thoughts of Sam Vimes collided in their rush to get through first. Something about the word king was getting in the way. Still smiling, the captain said, "That is to say, king of the river, sir. A little honour that we bestow on those heroes who have taken on old treachery and bested him. Allow me to present you with this goldish medal, sir. It's a small token, but show it to any captain on the river and you'll be carried for free, sir, from the mountains to the sea if you so desire." Whipped to a frenzy by the oration, the crowd burst into loud applause and the band struck up with the old classic, "Surprised, aren't you?" And the bouquet of flowers were hurled into the air and then picked up again carefully, because waste not, want not, and the band played and the wheels turned and the water was whisked into a foam as the Vimes family went down the river for a wonderful holiday. Young Sam was allowed to stay up to see the dancing girls, although he didn't see the point. Vimes, however, did, and there was a conjurer, and all the other entertainment people subject themselves to in the name of fun. Although he did laugh a bit when the conjurer picked his pocket in order to put in the ace of spades and found himself holding the knife that Sam had brought along just in case. When you aren't expecting it, that's when you should expect it. And the conjurer had not expected it, and looked goggle-eyed at Vimes until he said, "Oh my, you're him, aren't you? Commander Vimes himself." And to Vimes's horror, he turned to the crowd with, "A big hand, please, ladies and gentlemen, for the hero of the wonderful Fanny!" In the end, Vimes had to take a bow, which meant obviously that young Sam took a bow next to him, causing much moistening of female eyes throughout the restaurant. And then the barman, who apparently didn't know the score, created on the spot the Sam Vimes, which Sam later pretended to be embarrassed about when it became part of the repertoire in every drinking establishment on the plains, apart from, of course, those where the clientele tended to open their bottles with their teeth. Footnote. Or perhaps somebody else's. End footnote. In fact, he was so overcome by honor that he actually drank one of the cocktails and another afterward as well, on the basis that Sybil couldn't really object in the circumstances. Then he sat singing beer mats and pieces of paper. Then he sat signing beer mats and pieces of paper and chatting to people rather more loudly than he normally chatted, until even the barman decided to call it a day and Sybil towed her tipsy husband to bed. And on the way to their suite, he distinctly overheard one lady say to another in passing, "Who's the new barman? Never seen him on this run before." The Roberta E. Biscuit ploughed on into the night, the water leaving a temporary white trail behind her ample stern. One ox had been led into the stable in the scuppers, leaving the other one to maintain some sensible headway while the pleasure cruise paddled toward the morning. Everyone except the pilot and the lookout was sleeping, drunk or otherwise prone. The barman was nowhere to be seen. Barmen come and go, after all. Whoever notices the barman? And in the corridor of staterooms, a figure waited in the shadows, listening. it listened for whispers, creaks, and snores building up. There was a snore. Oh yes, the shadow drifted along the dark corridor, the occasional betraying creak, lost among the symphony of sounds made by any wooden boat underway. There was a door. There was a lock. There was a gentle exploration, being the kind that betrays cunning and strength rather than actually having them. There was a lockpick, a delicate movement of hinges, and the same movement again as the door was gently pushed shut from the inside. There was a smile so unpleasant that it could almost be seen in the dark, especially by the dark-assisted eye. And so there was a scream, instantly cut short. "Let me tell you how this is going to be," said Sam Vimes, as urgent sounds suddenly filled the corridor. He leaned over the body spread-eagled on the floor. "You will be humanely handcuffed for the rest of this voyage, and you will be watched carefully by my valet, Willikins, who, apart from making a really good cocktail, is also not burdened by being a policeman." He squeezed a little harder and went on in a conversational tone. "Every now and again I have to sack a decent copper for police brutality, and I do sack them. You may be sure of that, for doing what the average member of the public might do if they were brave enough and if they had seen the dying child or the remains of the old woman. They would do it to restore in their mind the balance of terror." Vimes squeezed again. "Often the law treats them gently, if it worries about them at all. But a copper, now, he's a lawman, certainly if he works for me, and that means his job stops at the arrest, Mr. Stratford. So what's stopping me from squeezing the life out of a murderer who has broken into the room he thought would hold my little boy? With, oh dear me, such a lot of little knives. Why, will I squeeze him only to unconsciousness, while despising myself for every fragment of breath I begrudge him? I'll tell you, mister, that what stands between you and sudden death right now is the law you don't acknowledge. And now I'm going to let you go, just in case you die on me. And I couldn't have that. However, I suggest you don't try and make a run for it, because Willikins is not bound by the same covenant as I am, and he is also quite merciless and very fond of young Sam, who's sleeping with his mother, I'm glad to say. Understand? You picked the single room, didn't you, where the little boy would be? It's lucky for you that I'm a bastard, Mr. Stratford, because if you'd broken into the stateroom where my wife, although I never dare tell her so, is snoring at least as loud as any man, you would have found that she has at her command a considerable amount of weaponry. And knowing the temper of the Ramkins, she would have quite probably done things to you that would make Willikins say, "Whoa, that's going a bit too far." What they have, they keep, Mr. Stratford. Vimes momentarily changed his grip. "And you must think I'm a bloody fool. Some bloke, they reckon, was a great thinker once said, 'Know thyself.' Well, I know myself, Mr. Stratford, I'm ashamed to say, right down to the depths. And because of that, I know you, like I know my own face in the shaving mirror. You're just a bully who found it easier and easier and decided that everybody else wasn't really a real person, not like you. And when you know that, there's no crime too big, is there? No crime you won't do. You might reflect that while you're going to hang. I'm quite certain that Lord Rust, your boss, will in all probability walk free. Did you really think he'd protect you? The prostrate Stratford mumbled something. Sorry, sir. Didn't quite catch that. King's evidence, Stratford blurted out. Vimes shook his head, even if Stratford couldn't see it. Mr. Stratford, you're going to hang, whatever you say. I'm not going to bargain with you. You must surely realise that you have nothing to bargain with. It's that simple. On the floor, Stratford growled. Damn him! I'll tell you anyway. I hate the smarmy bugger. What do you want me to say? It was a good job that he couldn't see Vimes's face, and Vimes merely said, However, I'm sure that Lord Veterinary will be very happy to hear anything that you have to say, sir. He's of a mercurial nature, and I'm sure there is hanging. Slumped on the floor and wheezing, Stratford said, Everyone had that bloody cocktail. I saw them. You had 3, and everybody says you're a lush. There was laughter as the door came open, letting in a little light. His Grace had what you might call the virgin Sam Vimes, said Willikins. No offence meant to the commander. Ginger and chili, a dash of cucumber juice, and a lot of coconut milk. And very tasty, said Vimes. Take him away, Willikins, will you? And if he tries anything, you know what to do. You were born knowing what to do. For a moment, Willikins touched his forelock and then said, Thank you, Commander. I appreciate the compliment. And Sam Vimes finished his holiday. Of course, it couldn't be entirely fun, not with the clacks, not with people sending messages like, I don't want to bother you, but this will only take a moment of your time. A great many people didn't want to bother Sam Vimes. With a great effort of will, they somehow managed to overcome their distaste and do so nevertheless. One of them, and this message did not contain an apology of any sort, came from Havelock, Lord Veterinary, and read, We will talk about this. That morning, Vimes hired a small boat with its captain and spent a happy time with young Sam, picking periwinkles off the rocks on one of the many small islands off the Quirm coast. And then they gathered driftwood, made a fire, and boiled them and ate them with the help of a pin, racing to be the first to get one wiggly morsel out of its shell. And of course, there was brown bread and butter, and finally plenty of salt and vinegar, so that the periwinkles tasted of salt and vinegar rather than of periwinkles, which would be a disaster. Footnote. For those unfamiliar with them, periwinkles, like cockles and whelks, might be considered the snot of the sea. End of footnote. With the boys out of the way, Sybil changed the world in her own quiet way by sitting at the table in their apartment and writing in the neat cursive script that she had been taught as a girl. A large number of clack messages. One of them was to the director of the Royal Opera House, of which her ladyship was a major patron, another was to Lord Veterinary, and 3 more went to the secretary of the Low King of the Dwarves. The secretary of Diamond King of Trolls, and the secretary of Lady Margolota of Uberwald, ruler of all that country that was above ground. But it didn't stop here. But it didn't stop there. No sooner had the maid come back from carrying the first batch to the top of the hill than she was sent spinning up there again with all the rest. Lady Sybil was a ferocious writer of letters, and if there was any person of substance on the plains and beyond who didn't get a letter from Sybil that day, it was because their name had fallen out of her beautifully bound and obsessively updated little black book, which was, in fact, a delicate pink with tiny embroidered flowers on it and a small phial of perfume. Nevertheless, the only comparable weapon in the entire history of persuasion was probably the ballista. In the afternoon, Lady Sybil took tea with some of her girlfriends. All old girls from the Quirm College for Young Ladies, and had a very satisfactory time talking about other people's children while silently driven by messages sleeting across the land with a precision and speed that no wizard would have contemplated. The world began to change its mind. Concurrently, Vimes took young Sam to the zoo, where he met the keepers, nearly all of whom had known somebody on the wonderful Fanny and who opened every door to them and nearly every cage. The curator himself came along to witness this cheerful 6-year-old who was methodically weighing giraffe poo on a pair of ancient snuff scales, dissecting it with a couple of old kitchen knives and making notes in a notebook with a picture of a goblin on the front. But for Sam Vimes, a highlight was the elephant's delivery that young Sam had been looking forward to. Just as the Vimes party approached, Jumbo obliged, and his son was, almost literally, in hog heaven. Not even the philatelist, a specialty in philately, one who collects or studies stamps. Philatelist. Not even the philatelist, finding a rare reversed head blue triangle stamp in an unregarded second-hand stamp collection, could have been happier than young Sam, toddling away with his steaming bucket. Young Sam had seen the elephant, and so had Sam Vimes. The curator had said that young Sam was incredibly gifted and seemed to have a natural grasp of the disciplines of natural philosophy, a comment that caused Sam's father to nod wisely and hope for the best. They rounded off the day with a visit to the fun fair, where Vimes gave the man $1 for the ride on the upsy-daisy machine and was given change for $0.25. When he objected, the man swore at Vimes, lashed out and was surprised to be caught in a grip of steel, marched through a cheering crowd and handed over to the nearest quirm copper, who saluted and asked if Vimes could sign his helmet. That was a small thing, but as Vimes always said, behind small things you often find big things. He also won a coconut, a definite result, and young Sam got a stick of rock candy with quirm all the way through, which stuck his teeth together. Another memorable occasion. In the middle of the night, Vimes, who had been listening to the pounding of the surf for some time, said, "Are you awake, dear?" And then, because this is how these things are done, raised his voice a little when he got no answer and repeated, "Are you awake, dear?" "Yes, Sam, I am now." Vimes stared at the ceiling. "I wonder if it's all going to work." "Of course it will. People are very enthusiastic about it. You know, they're intrigued, and I've pulled more strings than an elephant's corset. It will work. What about you?" There was a gecko on the ceiling. You didn't get them in Ankh-Morpork. It looked at Vimes with jeweled eyes. He said, "Well, it'll be more or less a standard procedure." He shifted uneasily, and the gecko retreated to the corner of the room. "I'm a bit worried, though. Some things I've done come within the law, and one or two others are rather ad hoc, as it were." Ad hoc, for the particular end or case at hand without consideration of wider application. Ad hoc. Adjective, ad hoc, concerned with a particular end or purpose, formed or used for specific or immediate problems or needs. Ad hoc. Fashioned from whatever is immediately available. Improvised. Ad hoc. Impromptu, down and dirty, ad lib, extemporary, off the cuff, etc. Ad hoc. "I'm a bit worried, though. Some things I've done come within the law, and one or two others are rather ad hoc, as it were." "You were just opening a way for the law to flow in, Sam. The end justifies the means." "I'm afraid a lot of bad men have used that to justify bad things, dear." Under the covers, Sybil's hand reached out to touch his. "That's no reason why one good man shouldn't use it to justify a good thing. Don't worry, Sam." Woman's logic, Sam thought. Everything is going to be all right because it ought to be all right. The trouble is, reality is never as simple as that and doesn't allow for paperwork. Vimes dozed comfortably for a while and then heard Sybil say in a whisper, "He's not going to escape, is he, Sam? You said he's good with locks." "Well, they have damn good locks on the cells here in Quirm. There's a guard watching him at all times, and he's going to be taken up to Ankh-Morpork on their hurry-up wagon under armed escort. I can't imagine the circumstances that would allow him to escape. After all, the Quirm lads want to do this one by the numbers. I bet they'll have shined up their armour until it looks like silver. They'll want to impress me, you see. Don't worry, I'm certain nothing will go wrong." They lay there, comfortable, and then Vimes said, "The curator of the zoo was very complimentary about young Sam." Sleepily, Sybil murmured, "Perhaps he'll be another Woolsthorpe, but maybe this time with the missing ingredient of common sense." "Well, I don't know what he's going to be," said Sam Vimes, "but I do know he'll be good at it." "Then he'll be Sam Vimes," said Sybil. "Let's get some sleep."